So, Bishop Paul, tell us a little bit about the experience that you've had of Pope Francis. What did you make of him as Pope and his papacy over the last number of years?
Well, I remember, and I think maybe many of us might remember the moment he walked out onto the balcony in St. Peter's, Wendy. I know I was going to a meeting that evening and we were all kind of stuck to our televisions wondering who was going to walk out onto the balcony. And my memory of him was, walking out just in the simple white cassock. And that sense, there was a sense there was something different.
Yeah. What did he say? Buenos Aires.
Yeah, just
That's
good evening
good
to
evening.
everybody,
Yeah.
and it was warm, it was welcoming. Described himself as the Bishop of Rome, you know what I mean, that he was engaging with the local diocese, his own diocese,
Yeah.
and then obviously the larger global world that he was now part of. Um, and then asking people to pray for him, you know. And also his name, Francis, Francis, that kind of humble servant. So that was there was something, as I say, a sense of something different happening there, and I think that followed through in his pontificate in the years afterwards. Even the images of him, in the days afterwards, he paying his own bill for the hotel he was staying in, carrying his own bag when he'd be getting on an airplane. That sense of humble service. And I think that was my initial kind of response or reaction to Pope Francis. Um, I think just generally speaking, there was a sense of warmth, and he's a pastor. You know what I mean? I think people could identify with him, and I could identify with him. There was a closeness to him that perhaps I wouldn't have felt maybe before. And very, very popular with people on the ground and with priests. And also a man who also challenged us, about our own, I think, encounter with Christ and how we live out that encounter in our daily interaction with one another. Um, I also remember one of the first interviews he did. Again, it brings out his humility. He was asked, who is Pope Francis? And his response is very simple. It was, I'm a sinner. That's how he opened that interview. He was aware of his own sinfulness, but also how God's grace can work through us, even if we are sinners. So yeah, Pope Francis, I think, connected with people, connected with the world, and that was something very, very positive.
And you can always tell that it was such a genuine connection. There's so many photos that you can point to of him embracing the sick, the elderly, the poor, the disabled, where you knew that this was a real, genuine moment where it was really him trying to reflect the love of Christ in that moment for that person. And he would just be there with that person, even though there was thousands of people around him. And you kind of had that experience yourself when you met him.
Yeah, I was very lucky when you're appointed a bishop. There's a course held in Rome. It's kind of jokingly known as the baby bishop's course. And
The intro, how to, of
yeah,
course,
yeah.
yeah.
And it's a very interesting meeting, actually. It's a gathering of all the newly ordained bishops from around the world. And in a sense, you get that great sense of the global church. You're meeting bishops, new bishops from maybe the United States, from Africa, from Asia, South America, so you really get that sense of the global church and meet one another. And that's very helpful and so on. But on the final day of that meeting, the Pope meets with the group of bishops. There was about 150 of us on the course I was on. And he came in and he had a very relaxed kind of way about him. He didn't have any script or anything like that. He just, spoke for a while and then he opened up the floor to questions. So any bishop could stand up at a microphone and ask him anything, which was, and many did. Um, that went on, I'd say, for about an hour or so. And, obviously he's quite an elderly man. So we were kind of saying he's hardly going to meet us all individually, 150 of us, but he actually did. And we had that just lovely little moment with him. And again, that sense of warmth and welcome was there. I know one of the bishops said to me that when he met him, the Pope says, don't forget your sense of humor. And I think that was a lovely part of his pontificate as well, his sense of humor, his humanity. And I think we all should remember that. But as you were saying, Wendy, his connection with people, and as a global leader, as a world leader today, I think his witness was really, really important and very, very powerful because, at the heart of his ministry as Pope uh, was the poor, the migrant, the prisoner. I'm often struck by the images of him on, Holy Thursday, going to prisons and washing the feet of prisoners and kissing the feet of prisoners. What a powerful witness that is as a global leader today. When we kind of worship things like power and wealth and so on, here was a global leader showing us a different way, the way of service. And, he lived that in his life and in his ministry as Pope. And I think we needed that in the world today. And I think it's the same too with the synod. We go on to talk about the synod and all. Again, my image of the synod, it happened over 2 Octobers in Rome, the actual gathering in Rome. But all of those people sitting around tables, they were from different parts of the world, from different cultures. Many had different views of the church and where we're at and where we should be going. But he was bringing people around tables to listen to one another, to understand one another, and to see how we can move forward together. And again, what a powerful witness that is to our world today. If world leaders could do more of that, we probably would have a very different world today.
And he
Ro-
did do that with world leaders. I mean, he
Did
visited some countries that no pope had ever been to before. And
absolutely, yeah,
I know that there was talk about there'd been, in often dangerous places and assassination attempts that were,
yeah.
yeah, uncovered and all that sort of stuff. But he did seem to have that ability to build bridges, perhaps in places that had been difficult to build bridges before.
Very much so. And because of his warmth and his personality, he could do that. Um, I also think too, one of the first documents he brought out was Evangelii Gaudium, and it's something I refer to myself constantly. It's a very practical document that talks about ministry, talks about, I suppose, our ministry, is missionary now, the missionary key of going out um, after you experience the encounter of Christ yourself, that you go out to share that in a joyful way with others. His image, as I say, of the church as a field hospital. That this is not all neat and tidy. It can be very messy. Ministry and life can be very messy. But we, as church leaders, as servants of the gospel, need to be there at the heart of where the church is at. Um, I also think his image of God as a God of mercy, I think was a very, very powerful image of God. And again, that's reflected in the life of Jesus. When Jesus looked at people, yes, he saw the weakness and the faults and the failings, but he could see beyond that because of his mercy. And Pope Francis was, I suppose the second name for God, he would say, was mercy. And again, how much we need that today in our own personal lives, but also in the world. So I think that was a wonderful witness, offering us that image of God as mercy, who loves us as we are, but wants us to take us to a place that's even better than where we're at.
Just finally, Bishop Paul, certainly one of the things that impacted me the most was, and I know you've been to several yourself, was attending World Youth Days, but seeing the genuine joy of young people from every country in the world and their interactions with Pope Francis, and seeing those moments that we've touched on where he was just there with an individual, giving them his prayer, his time, his attention. And where he was really trying to put across to young people at those gatherings to be, as you say, missionaries of joy. What can we take from his life, his legacy, as we move forward in our own faith, do you think?
Yeah, actually, interesting. I was at the Krakow World Youth Day where he was there, and interesting enough, one thing I noticed, he wasn't like a kind of a rock star pope. In fact, I found him quite reserved in the midst of that. And what I was taking from that was that it's not about me, it's about Christ. And I think we all need to take that on board. It's not about me, it's about Christ and his mission. And that's a big challenge today. But that's what we're called to as missionaries in the world today, as Catholics and as Christians. So I would take that from Pope Francis, his example and his witness. Um, I also think too, as we were saying there, you know, who are we reaching out to? It's the person who, might be poor, the migrant, the prisoner, the sick, that we need to be there for them to serve their needs. As I say, it's not about us, it's about them, and meeting Christ in those who are broken and those who need our support and help. So I think Pope Francis, as I say, like he's the Pope, he's the head of a global church. whatever. But I think his example comes right down into the reality of the bits and pieces of our everyday lives, as Patrick Kavanagh put it. And I think he's had a huge impact in those ordinary bits and pieces that we all engage with every day.
Well, Bishop Paul Dempsey, thanks so much for that reflection on the way. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.